The ocean does not forget. Beneath thousands of meters of dark, cold water, where no sunlight has ever reached, where the pressure would crush a human body like paper, something waits. Something that has waited for over 11,000 years. For millennia, sailors crossing the Atlantic spoke in hushed voices about a place their ancestors remembered. A land of impossible wealth. A civilization so advanced, so powerful, that even the gods could not ignore it. A kingdom that rose to the height of human achievement. And then, in a single catastrophic night, vanished entirely from the face of the earth. Its name was Atlantis. And what most people do not know, what historians, geologists, and archaeologists have spent centuries arguing about, is that the evidence pointing to its existence may be hiding in plain sight, carved into ancient stone, written in forgotten texts, encoded in myths that span every corner of the globe. Tonight, we are going to follow that evidence. We are going to walk through the story of Atlantis from its very beginning, through its golden age, its wars, its corruption, and its catastrophic end. And we are going to ask the question that has haunted humanity for over 2,000 years. Was Atlantis real? Stay with us, because by the time this story is over, you may never look at the ocean the same way again. The story of Atlantis, as the world knows it, begins with a single man. His name was Plato, and in 360 BCE, the Greek philosopher wrote two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, in which he described in remarkable detail a civilization that existed roughly 9,000 years before his own time. He did not present it as a fable. He did not frame it as poetry or mythology. He presented it as history, passed down through generations, originating from Egyptian priests, who had preserved records far older than anything the Greeks possessed. According to Plato's account, the story came first to Solon, one of Athens' most respected statesmen, who traveled to Egypt around 590 BCE. In the city of Sais, Solon encountered elderly priests who showed him records inscribed in temple walls. These priests, according to Plato, told Solon something extraordinary, that the Greeks were children when it came to the age of civilization, that there had been civilizations far greater, far older, that the Greeks had entirely forgotten. And among those lost civilizations, the priests described one above all others. They called it Atlantis, the island of Atlas, the Titan condemned to hold the sky upon his shoulders. The priests said it had existed beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we today call the Strait of Gibraltar, in what they described as a true ocean, vast beyond the Mediterranean Sea. This location placed Atlantis somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean itself. The civilization the priests described was staggering. Atlantis, they said, was a continent-sized island, larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined. It was ringed by alternating bands of land and sea, concentric circles of earth and water, like the rings of a tree, each one more fortified and more magnificent than the last. At its center sat the royal city, a metropolis of impossible wealth, covered in metals unknown in the ancient world, adorned with temples roofed in ivory and gold. The Atlanteans were not ordinary humans. According to Plato, they were the descendants of Poseidon himself, the god of the sea, who had fallen in love with a mortal woman named Cleito and built his home upon a hill in the center of the island. Their bloodline carried divine power, and for thousands of years, they used that power to build a civilization unlike anything the ancient world had ever seen. They commanded armies and navies. They had mastered agriculture, metallurgy, architecture, and navigation at a time when much of the world was still living in scattered tribes. Their fleets controlled the seas. Their armies marched across North Africa and Southern Europe. They were, in every meaningful sense of the word, an empire. And then something changed. Plato writes that over the generations, as the divine blood of the Atlanteans mixed more and more with ordinary human blood, the nobility of their character began to fade. Greed replaced generosity. Ambition replaced wisdom. They began to look beyond their own lands toward conquest. They launched a great military campaign across Europe and North Africa, pushing as far as Egypt. But they did not go unchallenged. The Athenians, according to Plato, rose up to meet them. In a war that he describes as the greatest of the ancient world, Athens stood alone against the Atlantean Empire and won. The Atlantean army was repelled, driven back. But before the victory could be fully celebrated, something cataclysmic happened. In a single day and night, according to Plato's account, violent earthquakes and floods of extraordinary power struck both Athens and Atlantis simultaneously. The Athenian army was swallowed by the earth and Atlantis. The entire island, the entire civilization, sank beneath the waves of the ocean. Gone. Without a trace. This is the account that Plato left behind. And for over 2,000 years, the world has never stopped asking, is this true? The simplest explanation, and the one that most mainstream historians accept, is that Plato made it up. This is not an unreasonable position. Plato was a philosopher who frequently used fictional settings and invented dialogues to communicate philosophical ideas. The Republic, one of his most famous works, describes an ideal society that never existed. The allegory of the cave is a story meant to illustrate epistemological theory, not describe a real cave. Plato was, by trade, a creator of what we might call philosophical fiction. And looking at the Atlantis account through that lens, it fits perfectly into the kind of morality tale Plato loved to tell. A great civilization corrupted by pride and greed, divine punishment, the humbling of human arrogance by the forces of nature and the gods. These are deeply Platonic themes. Many scholars have pointed out that the Athenian victory over Atlantis in Plato's account conveniently flatters Athens, his own city. Above all others, the heroic defenders of civilization are the Athenians. The villains are a foreign, exotic empire from beyond the known world. This smells to many historians less like objective historical record and more like civic propaganda dressed in mythological clothes. Furthermore, the scale of Atlantis as Plato describes it is almost impossibly large, a continent bigger than Libya and Asia Minor combined. That would make it roughly the size of what we now know as the Atlantic Ocean itself. No geological survey has ever found evidence of a sunken continent of that scale in the Atlantic. And there is the question of timing. Plato places Atlantis's fall at 9,600 BCE, approximately 11,000 years before his writing. This is the end of the last ice age. Human civilization at that time, according to all the archaeological evidence we have, consisted primarily of hunter-gatherer bands and early agricultural settlements. The idea that a seafaring empire with advanced metallurgy and architecture existed at that time contradicts everything we know about the development of human civilization. So, Plato invented it. Case closed. Except it isn't. Because when researchers began looking beyond Plato, looking at mythology, geology, archaeology, and ancient texts from cultures that had never read a single word he wrote, they found something unexpected. Something that would not go away. Every culture on Earth has a flood myth. This is not an exaggeration. From the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh to the Hebrew Bible's account of Noah, from the Hindu Puranas to the Aztec legend of the Four Sons, from the Cherokee story of the Great Flood to the ancient Chinese tale of Gunyu. Virtually every civilization in recorded human history has preserved a story about a catastrophic deluge that destroyed a previous world. The remarkable thing is not that these stories exist. Water is central to human life, and flooding is a real geological event. The remarkable thing is how specific and how similar these stories are. In dozens of independent flood myths, from cultures with no contact with each other, the following elements recur with uncanny consistency. A civilization, often described as unusually advanced, unusually wise, or unusually powerful, exists in a former age. This civilization becomes corrupt or arrogant, transgressing against the divine or natural order. A catastrophe is sent, usually flood, sometimes fire, sometimes earthquake, sometimes all three simultaneously. Only a small number of survivors escape, usually by boat or by climbing to high ground. These survivors preserve the knowledge of the lost civilization and carry it forward into the new world. This is not the structure of random independent invention. This is the structure of something that happened. Geologists have confirmed that at the end of the last ice age, precisely the period in which Plato places the fall of Atlantis, sea levels around the world rose dramatically. The melting of the great ice sheets caused global sea levels to rise by as much as 120 meters over the course of several thousand years. Coastlines that were once habitable land disappeared beneath the ocean. The Black Sea, currently an inland sea, was once a freshwater lake surrounded by farmland. Until approximately 5600 BCE, when rising Mediterranean waters breached the natural dam at the Bosphorus and flooded it catastrophically. Studies suggest this happened with terrifying speed. The Persian Gulf was once dry land, a fertile river valley that existed during the Ice Age, habitable for humans for tens of thousands of years. It is now underwater. Doggerland, the landmass that once connected Britain to mainland Europe, was once home to thriving Mesolithic populations. Its forests, rivers, and human settlements now lie under the North Sea, between 20 and 40 meters beneath the surface. Everywhere we look, the archaeological and geological record tells the same story. Human civilization was developing along coastlines that the rising seas then swallowed. The people who lived there did not simply disappear. They fled. They carried their memories with them, and those memories became myths. But here is where it becomes extraordinary. If the coastal civilizations of the Ice Age were more developed than we have assumed, if there were populations with boats, with knowledge of the stars, with agricultural and architectural skills, then the flood that swallowed their world would have been the most devastating event in human history, and the story of that flood, carried by survivors into every corner of the earth, would have become the foundation of every culture that came after. Every flood myth, every story of a golden age lost to the sea, every legend of wise ancestors who came from a drowned homeland and taught the people how to build, how to farm, how to read the stars, all of it possibly echoes the same catastrophe. One civilization, one flood, one story, told in 1,000 different voices across the entire span of recorded human memory. If Atlantis was real, where was it? This is the question that has consumed researchers, explorers, and obsessives for centuries. And over that time, a remarkable number of candidates have emerged, each one supported by genuine evidence, each one incomplete in some way. The Minoan hypothesis, the most academically accepted candidate for Atlantis, is not in the Atlantic at all. It is in the Aegean Sea. The Minoan civilization, based on the island of Crete, was the first advanced civilization in European history. They built palatial complexes with running water and elaborate drainage systems. They were master seafarers who traded across the entire Mediterranean. Their art depicts nature, sport, and daily life. with an elegance and sophistication that would not be matched in Europe for another 1,000 years. And around 1600 BCE, a catastrophe struck them. The volcanic island of Thera, today called Santorini, erupted in what modern geologists believe was one of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history. The eruption was so powerful that it may have generated tsunamis reaching 50 meters in height that struck Crete and the surrounding islands with devastating force. The ash cloud from Thera spread across the Mediterranean, blocking sunlight and disrupting agriculture across a vast area. The Minoan civilization, which had been at the height of its power, collapsed shortly afterwards. Palace complexes were abandoned. Trade networks collapsed. The population declined dramatically. Researchers who support the Minoan hypothesis argue that this event, the volcanic destruction of Thera and the subsequent collapse of Minoan Crete, is what Plato's account is describing. The circular structure of Thera's caldera, even today, resembles the concentric ring design Plato attributed to Atlantis. The timing, though off by several centuries when compared to Plato's account, fits within the range of distorted oral tradition. The problem? The scale doesn't match. Minoan Crete, while impressive, was not a continent. It did not control an empire reaching from North Africa to the Atlantic. And Plato is extraordinarily specific about Atlantis being beyond the Pillars of Hercules, outside the Mediterranean entirely. The Atlantic Ridge hypothesis. The most dramatic candidate is the Mid-Atlantic Ridge itself. Stretching from north to south through the center of the Atlantic Ocean, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge is a vast underwater mountain range, the result of the boundary between the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates. At several points along this ridge, islands rise above the sea surface: the Azores, St. Helena, Ascension Island. Some researchers have proposed that during the last ice age, when sea levels were significantly lower, portions of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge may have been above water, creating island landmasses in the Atlantic that have since been submerged. If this is true, then Plato's description of a large island beyond the Pillars of Hercules in the true ocean would match precisely. The Azores, in particular, have been a focus of speculation. These islands sit atop the Mid-Atlantic Ridge at a latitude and longitude that would place them in the general region where Atlantis is traditionally sought. Some researchers have pointed to unusual geological formations near the Azores, structures that appear too regular to be entirely natural, as possible evidence of ancient human construction. The geological evidence, however, remains inconclusive. While there is evidence that sea levels were lower during the last ice age, there is no confirmed evidence of a continental-scale landmass in the middle of the Atlantic that then sank. The Richat structure, Eye of the Sahara. In the last decade, one of the most compelling new candidates has emerged. And it is not underwater at all. In the Sahara Desert of Mauritania, there is a geological formation so distinctive that it was used by early NASA astronauts to orient themselves while looking down at Earth from orbit. It is called the Richat structure. But it is known by another name, the Eye of the Sahara. Seen from above, the Richat structure is a series of concentric rings of rock and desert floor. Ringed layers, each one distinct, spreading outward from a central point. Its diameter is approximately 40 kilometers. The resemblance to Plato's description of Atlantis, with its concentric rings of land and water, is immediately striking. When researchers began examining the Richat structure more closely, the parallels became more specific. The rings themselves contain evidence of ancient water channels. The central structure shows signs of geological upheaval consistent with a catastrophic flood or impact event. The surrounding region, now one of the driest places on Earth, shows clear evidence of having been significantly wetter in the ancient past. During the African humid period, when the Sahara was green, traversed by rivers and dotted with lakes, the measurements of the Richat structure's dimensions align with Plato's descriptions to a degree that has convinced some researchers this is not coincidence. The outer rings match the dimensions Plato gives. The central platform, what would have been the site of the royal city, sits at an elevation consistent with Plato's description. The objections are significant. The reach-out structure is not on an island. It is not surrounded by ocean. It is deep in the interior of Africa. But proponents of this theory point out that 12,000 years ago the region looked entirely different. The Sahara was not desert. Rivers ran through it. And when the catastrophe came, the end of the African humid period, possibly accelerated by a comet impact or a sudden climate shift, the water vanished, the rivers dried up, and what was once the center of a great civilization became the most inhospitable desert on Earth. The people who lived there fled, and the story they carried became the legend of Atlantis. The Antarctic hypothesis. The most radical candidate is also the most geographically remote. Antarctica, some researchers have proposed, was not always covered in ice. Before the last glaciation, parts of the Antarctic continent may have been habitable, temperate, or even tropical in their climate, with exposed coastlines, rivers, and vegetation. Supporting this hypothesis is a series of ancient maps. Most famously, the Piri Reis map of 1513, which appear to depict the coastline of Antarctica before it was covered by ice. Antarctica was not officially discovered by European explorers until 1820. Yet the Piri Reis map, compiled from sources that the Ottoman admiral Piri Reis claimed were ancient, appears to show an Antarctic coastline that matches the subglacial topography of the continent, as revealed by modern radar surveys. How could ancient mapmakers have known what Antarctica looked like under its ice? Supporters of the Antarctic hypothesis argue that a civilization existing in what is now Antarctica before the glaciation intensified would match Plato's description of a civilization destroyed by a catastrophic natural event, the cooling and glaciation of Antarctica, which displaced or destroyed any population living there, would have been exactly the kind of world-ending catastrophe preserved in flood myths. The mainstream scientific community considers this hypothesis highly unlikely. The Antarctic ice sheet is ancient, and the evidence for a pre-glacial human civilization there is non-existent, but the Piri Reis map remains unexplained, a piece of evidence that does not fit neatly into any conventional historical timeline. To believe in Atlantis, one must be willing to believe something that many people find deeply uncomfortable: that human civilization may be far older than we think. The conventional timeline of human civilization runs roughly as follows. After the last ice age, around 10,000 BCE, humans began transitioning from hunter-gatherer lifestyles to settled agriculture. The first cities appear in Mesopotamia and Egypt around 3,500 to 3,000 BCE. Writing, metallurgy, astronomy, and complex social organization develop from there. This timeline suggests that nothing resembling advanced civilization existed before approximately 5,000 years ago. But the archaeological record has been delivering a series of increasingly inconvenient surprises. Göbekli Tepe. In 1994, excavations at a site in southeastern Turkey called Göbekli Tepe revealed something that should not have existed. Göbekli Tepe is a complex of large circular enclosures made from massive T-shaped stone pillars, many of them over 5 meters tall and weighing between 10 and 20 tons each. The pillars are covered in intricate carvings of animals: foxes, lions, vultures, scorpions, and humans, executed with a skill and artistry that suggests a sophisticated artistic tradition. Göbekli Tepe was built approximately 11,600 years ago. More than 7,000 years before Stonehenge, more than 7,000 years before the Egyptian pyramids. At the time of its construction, humanity was supposedly still in the early stages of transitioning from hunting and gathering to settled agriculture. The people who built Göbekli Tepe, according to conventional theory, had not yet invented agriculture, pottery, or metalworking. They were, by definition, prehistoric in the truest sense of the word. And yet, they built Göbekli Tepe. The scale and precision of the site is staggering. The largest pillars weigh 20 tons and were transported from a quarry hundreds of meters away, then raised into precise positions in circular arrangements. The carvings show complex symbolic systems. The site was clearly not merely functional. It was designed to communicate meaning, to inspire awe, to serve as a center of something organized and intentional. And then, most mysteriously of all, approximately 8000 BCE, Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried. Someone, the people who built it, or their descendants, filled the entire complex with rubble and soil, sealing it beneath an artificial hill. It remained hidden for 11,000 years, until a Kurdish shepherd noticed something unusual in the landscape, and archaeologists began to excavate. Why would a civilization bury its greatest achievement? Some researchers suggest it was an act of preservation, deliberately hiding something of enormous value from an approaching catastrophe. Others suggest it was a ritual end to a sacred site. No definitive answer has been found. But Göbekli Tepe has forced the entire field of archaeology to reconsider a fundamental assumption that the complexity of human civilization increases in a straight line from simple to complex, from primitive to advanced. The existence of Göbekli Tepe suggests that there may have been peaks of sophisticated human culture far earlier than previously believed, peaks that collapsed and whose knowledge and achievements were lost. The Antikythera mechanism. In 1901, divers exploring a shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera recovered a corroded, barnacle-encrusted lump of bronze from the seafloor. For years, it was largely ignored. When it was finally analyzed properly, researchers discovered they were looking at a mechanical computer, a device of extraordinary precision, containing at least 37 interconnected bronze gears, capable of tracking the movements of the sun and moon, predicting eclipses, calculating the cycles of the Olympic Games, and modeling the motions of the known planets. It dated to approximately 150 to 100 BCE. Nothing comparable would be built again for another 1,400 years. The Antikythera mechanism was not a curiosity. It was evidence of a level of mechanical knowledge in the ancient world that our historical models simply did not account for. Its existence has never been fully explained. No workshops capable of producing it, no tradition of mechanism making at this level of complexity has ever been found in the archaeological record. Where did the knowledge to build it come from? And, if it existed, what else was built that we have not found? The pyramid question. The Great Pyramids of Egypt have never been fully explained. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built approximately 4,500 years ago according to conventional dating, is a structure of such extraordinary precision that its construction methods remain, to this day, a matter of genuine scholarly debate. The pyramid is aligned to true north with an accuracy of C0.05 degrees. Its base is leveled to within 2.1 centimeters across its entire 230-meter extent. Its four sides are oriented to the cardinal directions with an accuracy that modern engineers, using GPS, would be proud to achieve. It contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks, averaging 2.5 tons each, with some blocks in the interior chamber weighing 70 to 80 tons. The blocks fit together so precisely that a piece of paper cannot be slid between them. Egyptologists maintain that this was achieved by thousands of workers using copper tools, wooden sledges, and ramps, and there is genuine evidence for this. Workers' villages have been found. Administrative records of construction projects exist. Tools and materials consistent with the Egyptologists' theories have been discovered at the site. but a minority of researchers argue that the precision and scale of the Great Pyramid and its uncanny alignment with the stars of Orion's belt, as proposed by researcher Robert Bauval's Orion correlation theory, suggests a level of mathematical and astronomical sophistication that does not fit neatly into what we know about ancient Egypt. If there was an earlier civilization that had developed advanced knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and engineering, and if that civilization transmitted its knowledge to the Egyptians, the pyramids would be evidence not just of Egyptian genius, but of an inheritance from something older. If there was an advanced civilization at the end of the last ice age, whether on a sunken island along now submerged coastlines or somewhere in what is now desert, something destroyed it. Plato says it was divine punishment, earthquakes and floods sent by the gods. But what does the geological record say? The period between approximately 12,900 BCE and 11,700 BCE is one of the most dramatic in Earth's recent geological history. Scientists call it the Younger Dryas, a sudden, severe return to glacial conditions that interrupted the warming trend at the end of the last ice age. During the Younger Dryas, temperatures in the northern hemisphere plunged dramatically, possibly by as much as 10 degrees Celsius in some regions. Within decades, the warming that had been gradually melting the ice sheets and raising sea levels abruptly paused, and for approximately 1,200 years, the world returned to near glacial conditions. At the end of the Younger Dryas, approximately 11,700 years ago, the timing strikingly close to Plato's date for the fall of Atlantis, temperatures rose again with extraordinary speed. The remaining ice sheets collapsed catastrophically. Sea levels rose by tens of meters over the course of centuries. What caused the Younger Dryas? For decades, the dominant hypothesis was that a massive influx of cold meltwater into the North Atlantic disrupted ocean circulation, triggering the cooling. But in 2007, a team of researchers published evidence for a more dramatic explanation: the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. This hypothesis proposes that approximately 12,900 years ago, Earth experienced a bombardment from a fragmented comet or asteroid, a swarm of cosmic debris that struck or exploded over the ice sheets of North America and possibly other regions. The impacts, or the airbursts of a fragmenting body, would have triggered massive wildfires, sent enormous quantities of dust and soot into the atmosphere, and destabilized the ice sheets in ways that caused catastrophic flooding. The evidence presented by researchers includes a thin layer of platinum, rare on Earth but common in asteroids, found in sediments from this period at sites across North America, Europe, and the Middle East. Microscopic diamonds and other materials consistent with extreme heat and pressure events. Widespread evidence of simultaneous fires at the Younger Dryas boundary at sites on multiple continents. The sudden extinction of dozens of large mammal species. The mammoths, the saber-toothed cats, the giant ground sloths. At precisely this moment, the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis remains controversial within the scientific community, but it has gathered a significant body of supporting evidence, and it has not been definitively refuted. If it is true, then the following scenario becomes scientifically plausible. At the end of the last ice age, an advanced coastal civilization existed somewhere in the world, perhaps on islands in the Atlantic, perhaps along coastlines that are now submerged, perhaps in regions that are now desert. Then, approximately 12,900 years ago, a cosmic catastrophe struck. Massive fires, tsunamis generated by ice sheet destabilization, and the sudden onset of the Younger Dryas climate shift destroyed coastal settlements across a vast area. The survivors fled inland, carrying with them the memories of what they had lost. Over the following millennia, sea levels rose further, swallowing whatever physical evidence of the old civilization remained above water. The stories of the drowned homeland, of the civilization that had sunk beneath the sea in a single catastrophic night were preserved in myth and legend across every human culture on Earth. Until finally, a Greek philosopher named Plato wrote them down. If Atlantis was real, it did not simply disappear. Its people survived, at least some of them, and if those survivors carried advanced knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, agriculture, architecture, navigation, then they would have been extraordinarily valuable to the less developed populations they encountered in their flight. This may explain one of the most persistent and puzzling mysteries of ancient history: the sudden, seemingly independent emergence of complex civilization in multiple places around the world at roughly the same time. Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, China, Mesoamerica. All of these civilizations appear to emerge with their foundational technologies: writing, agriculture, astronomy, monumental architecture, already relatively well developed, with surprisingly little evidence of the gradual experimentation and failure that we would expect to see if they were developing these things from scratch. Researcher Graham Hancock has argued extensively, controversially, but with genuine scholarship, that these civilizations were all seeded by the same source: survivors of a lost civilization, the teachers of the gods referenced in myths, from Egypt to South America, who arrived after the catastrophe and passed on what they knew. The Egyptian god Osiris, described as a divine king who taught humanity agriculture and civilization before being murdered and resurrected. The Mesopotamian deity Oannes, described by ancient historians as a being who emerged from the sea and taught humans writing, science, and the arts. The Mesoamerican god Quetzalcoatl, a feathered serpent who arrived from across the ocean and gave humanity the gifts of knowledge and civilization before departing. Could these be mythological memories of the same thing? Real human beings, survivors of a drowned civilization, arriving in boats, bringing knowledge and being remembered by grateful peoples as gods. The idea is not provable with the evidence currently available, but it is not inherently impossible, and the consistency of this pattern, wise, civilizing outsiders arriving from beyond the sea and teaching primitive peoples across cultures with no contact with each other, is a phenomenon that demands explanation. The search for Atlantis has never stopped. In the 1960s, archaeologist J. Manson Valentine discovered what appeared to be a road or platform of flat limestone blocks on the seafloor near Bimini Island in the Bahamas, a formation that became known as the Bimini Road. Some researchers believe it is a man-made structure. Others insist it is a natural geological formation. The debate continues. Off the coast of Cuba, Soviet-era researchers claim it to have detected sonar images of large geometric structures on the seafloor, apparent platforms and roads at depths consistent with being submerged by rising post-ice age sea levels. These findings were never conclusively confirmed. The Richat structure in Mauritania continues to attract attention from researchers who believe it represents the actual physical site of Atlantis, not drowned beneath the ocean, but buried by the desert. New satellite imaging and geological surveys of the region are ongoing. Underwater archaeologists have confirmed the existence of submerged prehistoric settlements in multiple locations around the world: off the coast of India, in the Gulf of Mexico, in the North Sea, in the Mediterranean. These are not mythological. These are real sites, now underwater, that humans once called home. The evidence does not prove that Atlantis existed in the specific form Plato described, but it proves something equally important: that the ocean has swallowed entire chapters of human history, that there are stories written in the seafloor that we have not yet learned to read, that the world Plato described a world of advanced coastal civilizations wiped out by catastrophic flooding, is not as impossible as it once seemed. The search is ongoing, and with every advance in underwater archaeology, in satellite imaging, in geological analysis, the possibility of finding something real beneath the waves grows slightly less remote. Somewhere out there, beneath the dark water, the evidence waits. The ocean does not forget. Whether Atlantis was a real place or a philosophical allegory, it has served as something more than a mystery for over 2,000 years. It has been a mirror. In Plato's story, Atlantis is not destroyed by an external enemy. It is not conquered. It destroys itself. Through pride, through greed, through the belief that power and wealth make a civilization worthy of survival. The gods do not strike it down because it is weak. They strike it down because it has forgotten what it once was. There is a warning in that story. A warning that has been relevant in every age since Plato wrote it, and that remains relevant today. Every civilization believes itself exceptional. Every empire believes itself permanent, and the ocean of time has swallowed every single one. But the search for Atlantis is ultimately not about the past. It is about us. It is about the human need to believe that somewhere, at some point in history, we got it right. That there was a golden age, a time of wisdom and harmony that is not merely a dream, but a memory. That it is possible. That it has been done. And perhaps the most powerful thing about the legend of Atlantis is not the mystery of where it was. It is the question of whether we are capable of building it again. And this time, making it last. Thank you for spending this time with us. The sea keeps its secrets well, but we keep looking. If this story moved you, if you found yourself wondering, as we did, about what truly lies beneath the waves of history, then we have a few things to ask of you. First, hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it tells the algorithm that stories like this one deserve to be seen. Every like helps this video reach someone who might never have heard of Göbekli Tepe, the Younger Dryas, or the Eye of the Sahara. That matters. Second, subscribe and hit the bell. We are going deep. In upcoming episodes, we are covering the Sumerian civilization and its mysterious origins, the true timeline of ancient Egypt, the secrets of the Nazca lines, and the question of whether there was global maritime civilization 10,000 years before Columbus. You do not want to miss those. Third, drop a comment below. Tell us, where do you think Atlantis was? The Azores? The Eye of the Sahara? Beneath the ice of Antarctica? Or do you think it was Plato's invention? A beautiful story with no physical reality. We read every comment, and the best theories often make it into future episodes. Finally, if you know someone who loves history, archaeology, or the great unanswered questions of the ancient world, share this video with them. The best conversations start with a question no one can fully answer. We will see you in the next one. Keep questioning. Keep searching. The answers are out there.